if someone shows up. Anyways, I just pressed the button. All right, we are live. Hello to everyone joining us for the YouTube. I don't know if anyone's here watching right now, but people might watch after the fact. I'm here with Victor, who's not Brian, but it's Victor from Fantasy Hockey Life, and I'll give you a proper intro when I actually start the show here. But thanks for joining. Short notice.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
It's gonna be a blast.
I always forget the link. Keeping Karlsson YouTube live something.
Oh, you know what? We ended up making it like a thing where we just go live for the patrons.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a patron.
But maybe we'll stop that actually. But I linked it in the I'll just send you the link. I linked it in the Discord in like the announcements channel if you want to check there. But also,
oh yeah, I can do that. It's fine.
Okay, cool. But yeah, I'm gonna also maybe stop doing that because to be honest, we made it private because we were on Blue Wire, and they like, I don't know. Strategically, it seemed like we just wanted people to download the episodes and not to watch it live. So we just wanted to make it a patron perk. But now we're not even on Blue Wire anymore. So.
Oh, what happened with Blue Wire? Oh, maybe you don't want to say.
Oh yeah, we are live. But
never mind. Don't tell me.
I mean, it's not too exciting of a story. But
yeah.
All right, so yeah, let's start the show then, I guess. And then we can figure this all out as we go. Which means I should start recording.
Don't forget that.
1 second. I'll just press record here. Here. Okay, I've got a bunch of recordings going. So I don't think we're going to lose this one. All right, I'll just get into it. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted today by two recent co-GMs who have agreed to keep each other in check if we're talking too much about our leagues in a self-indulgent way. I'm your host, Elan and and Brian was not able to make it today. Last minute, I pulled in a ringer. You know him from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast. And also recently, the Dauber Prospects Report, or no, you've changed it, the Dauber Prospects Review. What is the R and DPR now? I know you changed it.
It's report. It was radio.
Right.
Yeah, report.
Okay, so it's a good show with Peter Harling, and we had Peter on very recently. But this is Victor Nuno. Victor, longtime patron of Keeping Karlsson. Always great to talk to you. And like I just said, we've recently agreed to become co-GMs in a league. So this is actually the first time we've talked in person since we've agreed to that. So maybe we should just actually make this whole show just a strategy sesh.
Sounds good to me. Thanks for having me, Elon. Always fun to be on the mothership, as I like to call it.
Come on. Yeah, I guess the last time we did a show live was when we did that draft, right? Mid last season. I think it was on, we like split it between our show and your show where we were drafting one player per team. There was 4 of us, and we were only allowed to draft players who were like 50% rostered or less on Yahoo. And I can't recall who won, but I know that it was a pretty decisive victory for whoever.
It was close. It was close. I think you only won by, I don't know, 100 or something crazy like that.
Yeah, so people could go back and listen to that if they are, not sick of me bragging about things by the end of this episode, because this episode, okay, here's the plan. Victor came to me, so don't blame me, by the way, if you think this episode is too much, like talk about our own leagues. But Victor and I have been in a dynasty league together for a while now. We just finished season 3. Victor invited me. I'd never played dynasty before, and I'd been, a bunch of the different patrons were like telling me I got to give it a go, got to learn what this is all about. Finally, Victor convinced me to join this league that they were starting, and I've had a blast. And Victor was suggesting we could go and look back at some of like the early drafts that we had. We had that prospect draft to start, which we actually did an episode of Keeping Karlsson a couple years ago where we talked about the prospect draft. So now it's going to be fun to look back on it, a couple years later and see what were the real flubs and what were the real value picks later on. And in general, I guess we'll just kind of talk about Dynasty League strategy. Obviously, that's mainly, Victor, your podcast's focus. And Brian and I generally are talking about like 1-year leagues and kind of like even just like week to week, like what players are hot, which free agents to add, and who you can drop. And you're thinking like super long term all the time, but we're bringing your expertise here to the mothership, as you call it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super excited, and yeah, I think one of the things that's been really fun. I feel like a proud papa in some way, because it took a lot of convincing to get you to join a dynasty league, and obviously you did a good job. We'll talk about that, and I think your analysis have been so much more in depth. I know Brian likes to give you a hard time, like whenever you bring someone up, it's only because you have them on your team. But I think you have a keener eye for all of these, prospects, younger guys, how they're developing and what that means when they kind of pop up in the NHL. And that's to me what the dynasty angle is all about too. It helps you in redraft and other formats as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we always do a show every year where we look at who the rookies are going to be for the next season. And, it's always nice when I've heard of those players. I'm not just learning them from you for the first time. So that's definitely been a change since I joined this league. So for people who don't know, what is a dynasty league, right? Really quickly, for anyone who's just been playing in leagues, maybe even keeper leagues. But dynasty is a whole other beast because you keep your whole team. That's like the main thing about it is you're not like sending anyone back unless you choose to. You're keeping your whole team, and then every year you're generally just drafting from like the more recent players who have been actually drafted in the NHL entry draft. And then you could be in a super crazy type of league like ours where there's also salary cap and you have to keep that in consideration. And generally it's like a little bit higher than the NHL salary cap, but you're like, having to, your players' salaries are the same as the NHL salaries is one way to play. That's the way our league works anyways. And so there's definitely a lot to think about, a lot more than a 1-year league. And you can, and also another crazy thing that I learned when we started is you can't just drop someone. I guess that goes hand in hand with the salary cap, right? Like once you add a player who has a big salary, you're stuck with it unless you want to buy the player out, just like in the NHL. So for anyone who's never played in Dynasty League and is hearing this, and you might be thinking, as I used to think, like this sounds like way too much for me. Like I just want to play a chill fantasy league, but I don't know, it's really addictive. Like now I'm like always like reading about all these prospects, especially the prospects that I've added to my team. Anytime I'm kind of like bored, when you're bored, just browsing Twitter and just kind of seeing what's going on, I was like kind of searching for like whoever Voronkov, who I added last, just like, what's the latest on him? Like, I wonder if he's turning out okay, or like just all the different prospects on my team or the people in free agency who I have on my watch list. Of course, Twitter kind of sucks now. I used to be able to get like a really good sense of like the vibe on different players, and it's gotten a lot harder since they took away the blue check mark from the people who I could trust. But that's a whole other discussion. Anyways, Victor, we got a whole plan. I'm already blabbing. Let me mention very quickly, we are presented by DobberHockey.com. They've released the fantasy guide. This is the best time of year because you download that guide, you read it over, you get the projections, and then you just keep re-downloading it every single time Dobber makes changes. So check it out at dobberhockey.com. But yeah, Victor, where do we want to start here? I think we wanted to talk about some general strategy before kind of looking back, and you have pulled off something. Well, you haven't pulled it off yet, but it's looking pretty good. You did something that I am really interested to hear, like, how you did this and kind of your thought process. But for those of you who don't know, I'm in this league with Victor. Like I said, it's been 3 years now. Victor's coming like last place every year. His team is always terrible, but he's been like losing on purpose. He's been like the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Like he's had a process where he's just been focusing on trading all his good players for picks and prospects. And now this year he tanked. He got Bedard. Very annoying. And now he's decided he's going to go for it this year. And this summer has just been insane seeing what Victor's been doing, but I'll let him describe it. So Victor, why don't you tell people about this one strategy of how to start a new dynasty league?
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of people would say, and I would agree with, that if you're joining a new dynasty, just try to win now, because a lot of new leagues tend to fold and it tends to be difficult to have that longevity. And I knew that a lot of you were going to do that. I knew you were going to do that, Elan. I think you straight up said that right at the beginning. And a lot of people were pretty clear about their intentions of trying to win right away. So I wanted to do that too, but I thought, everyone's trying to do this now. It's going to be hard. So I just decided to zig when everyone else was zagging. And I decided to kind of go the other way. And we allowed in this league to trade picks before the draft, which is an insane process. And I don't necessarily recommend it because it was crazy keeping track. That's why we had to have this whole spreadsheet to keep track of all the picks. So a lot of people traded their prospect picks for pro picks because we did it all at once. We should
probably explain really quickly about that. So we had 2 drafts to start the league. One for players that had played at least, what was it, like 80 games or something, 82 games. And then anyways, there was like a pro draft, like where you couldn't take anyone who hasn't played that threshold. And we all drafted like kind of our pro teams. And then, we have like 20, 25 roster or prospect spots. And we have like 20, 25 prospect spots, and we had a whole separate draft to fill our prospect pools. So that's what you're talking about. The people traded their, and those were 2 separate drafts that we had. And you're saying that people were trading their prospect picks to get pros.
Exactly. In fact, a couple of people traded like their first 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 prospect picks for pro picks because they knew that that would, help them win more immediately, and it definitely helped their team be better. And so there's an interesting argument to be had about what's more valuable, like a top prospect pick or a top pro pick. And I think to some extent, I think it makes sense that the pro picks are more valuable because those guys are producing now. And as you get later on in the prospect picks, it's not necessarily as valuable. But of course, those first prospect picks can be extremely valuable because those guys are basically already playing in the league, right? Like Hale McCarr was one of I think the second overall pick, and he was already like amazing at that time. So it's an interesting process, but everyone else was kind of doing that. So I decided to go the other way, and I just amassed a ton of prospect picks, top prospects pick. I traded my first and second, and I think fifth or sixth pro pick, and I got all these top prospect picks. I think I had something crazy like 10 picks in the first few rounds. So I was able to really load up on prospects. And yeah, I decided to be kind of bad. And I'm the commissioner of this league, so I knew it was going to keep going. And also everyone in this league is kind of a ringer. So I knew that people weren't going to be bailing, or if they did, I would replace them. And the other thing, as you mentioned, because well, if you're bad, you can't just get the top pick. You have to win it because we have a consolation prize. So I finished last, or maybe second to last, all 3 years. But I only got the first pick this year, and that's because you have to earn it. And my team was not good enough to win the first overall pick. And
Right.
so
So
I had
I'll
to,
just explain that super quickly. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. Yeah. So basically, I really like this feature of this league that, yeah. So all the bottom teams play in their own playoffs. So like while all the serious contenders, like yours truly, are playing for the championship, all the losers are playing for just the pick, like, whatever the bottom 5, 6 teams. And so, yeah, you can't totally tank out. And actually, that's something I'm hoping to take advantage of this year, where like, because we'll get into it, but like, just like there's so many teams this year that are rebuilding that I feel like I'm kind of excited to see if I can, like, trade my pros or whatever, like with the teams that are rebuilding, just because they're going to be all fighting for that first overall pick. But you were definitely going for it this year because there was a big prize to be had.
yeah. The other 2 years, wasn't, if you remember the 21 and 22 drafts, everyone, there wasn't as exciting at the top, and I was kind of fine getting somewhere in the 1, 2, 3 range. It didn't really matter too much. So I knew I was going to get a good player. But this year, obviously, big difference between Bedard and Fantilli, Karlsson, Michkov, whatever. So yeah, I definitely wanted him, and I had to work really hard to get that pick because even the teams at the bottom, it was a lot to be able to. One of the big challenges I had was goaltending, just getting enough goalie starts, getting all the stats that you need. So it took and then of course, as Elan said, this is a cap league, so you have to be careful of like going over the cap and taking on too many contracts. So it was complicated, but yeah, I decided to have this long route. And then after winning Bedard, I had to take a look at my team and decide, okay, is it time to push my chips in and do it and go for it? And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna try to do the impossible here. I'm gonna try to go from worst to first.
Yeah, and I think the crazy thing is, not to spoil your whole story here, but I kind of thought you were gonna, go for it in like you were gonna finally, you had a decent team, and I thought you would just go, like, you had a lot of prospects that you've picked over the years that are probably gonna start in the NHL. Now you had Bedard, and like, I just kind of thought, like, I was looking at your team like, yeah, this is gonna be a pretty tough team to beat, maybe this year or next year. I didn't expect you to do what you did next, which is something, honestly, like, I'm not shocked very often when I play fantasy anymore. I feel like I've seen everything. But yeah, you just did the craziest trades I think I've ever seen. But I'll let
Well,
you
thank
describe
you.
what your strategy was here. But okay, TLDR, Victor had amassed like 12, 15 like good prospects. Like if you look at a list up from the Athletic of like who are the top 50 prospects in the NHL, you had like a whole bunch of them. And I was like, this is going to be a scary team one day. And then Victor just traded them all pretty
I
much.
pretty much did, yeah. But that kind of goes back to the original thing, is like, yeah, these players are good. Maybe some of them haven't hit all their potential yet. And I wanted to really make it, make a strong case to be a contender right now. And so that's what I did. So I traded a whole bunch of players, Lucas Raymond, Kirby Doc, let's see, I'm going down the list. Matthew Nyes, Uri Slafkovsky, Thomas Harley, William Eklund, Olin Zellweger, Spencer Knight, JJ Paterka, Quentin Byfield, Ivan Miroshnichenko, Christian Kairu, Veni Venelainen all left my team within the span of a few weeks, and a couple of those maybe were a little bit earlier. But and then a bunch of I traded a bunch of my draft picks, which I think a lot of people are thinking those first round picks are going to be really high. But my intention is that they're going to be very bad because I intend to be good this year. And so that's my hope, is that I'm losing out on the 19th or 20th overall pick. We'll see how that works out. But should I say who I brought in, or do you want to comment on those guys?
No, I mean, well, I mean, it'd be fun to comment on them one at a time. Maybe just like, oh, I have so many questions. You just listed like a ton of good prospects. I know Zellweger is someone you've been super high on. Like, was it hard for you to? You're a Sharks fan, and you traded Eklund. Like, was it hard for you to give up on some of these prospects that you picked them, you've been like cultivating them, you're excited about them, and then just to be like, get out of here. But yeah, it'll be really fun to hear the list of players you brought in. I'm really scared, I'll just say, as a competitor here. So I thought I had at least one more year where it won't be too hard. Like the team that I've been competing against every year, Taiwan Typhoons, Adam and Shane, and I figured like, yeah, I'll go to the finals of the Typhoons game, but I beat them last year, I could beat them again this year. And like there's a couple other teams that are kind of scary, but like, yeah, when you make your list. But yeah, how did it feel dumping like all of these like prized prospects of yours?
It felt fine. I mean, I think that you have to, if you really want to try to pretend like you're a GM, you have to try to be, a little indifferent to that and just think of them as assets, right? These are all assets. And so, yeah, trading guys like Byfield, who I've been so high on for a long time and still am to some extent, and Zellweger, Eklund. Yeah, these are guys I still believe in. It's not that I don't believe in them anymore. It's just that I know that the guys that I got can help me more right now. And that's what I'm looking at. So I go from this long-term view to like right now. I want to be good right now. And so those assets help me more with the guys that I got rather than ones that I left out. So this is who I brought in. So I got John Klingberg. Actually, that was a trade with you, getting a cap dump. And I kind of figured that his contract wouldn't be as high this year. And looks like he's going to run the top power play in Toronto. That's looking pretty good.
Well, I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Morgan Riley is still there. Like, I don't
Why
think
do you have John Klingberg on your team if he's not going to be in an offensive role, though?
I mean, I just don't want to say like, oh, guaranteed he's going to be running the top power play. Maybe like he'll compete for the job if like Riley struggles, or I mean, and also there's a second power play that needs to have a QB. So
he'll get some time.
I mean, Carolina just signed Tony DeAngelo. Are you saying that he's going to run the top power play now in Carolina? I think it's like between him and Burns.
Why do you have TDA on your team if he's not running a power play? At least a power play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just being defensive because I traded you John Klingberg. Though to be fair, since we're going to be going on tangents anyways, the trade at that moment, actually, I have a co-manager, by the way. You're doing this all alone. It's me and Matthew. So definitely big shout outs to Matthew for any strategy that I'm talking about. We did this together. But like we actually at that moment, we were looking at free agency, and like Nazem Kadri was just sitting there, and people might be like remembering the end of his recent season where he kind of like flamed out like his team, and that wasn't meant to be a pun. But like Kadri actually started the year super hot, and he was in free agency because he was at the start of this like 7-year, $7 million per year contract. And so I guess all of our managers in our league were just too afraid to take him because you're going to be stuck with that contract forever. And he's already like 30 years old. But Maddie and I were looking at him like, and we're trying to win now. I was like, oh, that would be a pretty sweet ad for us. Like, cause he's good for like hits. He's like face-off wins. We should probably mention this league is like a full bangers. It's got everything and face-offs and takeaways for whatever. So he's even good for that. So we were salivating, but we didn't have the cap space. We had John Klingberg, who was like 7 million for the year and wasn't doing anything. We also had Cal Peterson, who I hate, and we'll talk about when we go over the prospect draft. It's just like my least favorite player of all time, Cal Peterson, who's like eating up 5 mil for still 2 more years. And so I was like telling Maddie, like, let's just try to like dump these guys. Like maybe some people still like Cal Peterson because there was so many times. It's so sad because like we got so many trade offers for Cal Peterson of like really good players, and we kept on turning it down because he was supposed to be this like future starter of the Kings. And anyway, we all know how this turned out. But anyway, so I figured there was still some value to be had, and like Klingberg also isn't a complete nobody. So yeah, we were just thinking if we could dump these two, then we can grab Kadri, who will actually help us now. So I think the moment you accepted the trade, and it was like we just basically sent you those two guys for a third. Which I ended up flipping that third just recently for Max Pacioretty. So I like to think of it as we traded, and then we added. Oh, as soon as you accepted the deal, the second later we added Nazem Kadri out of free agency. So it ended up being, as far as I'm concerned, we sent you Klingberg and Peterson for Pacioretty and Kadri. Oh, and then we actually traded Kadri this past offseason for Neil Pionk. So But anyways, now I'm getting too into the
Yeah.
weeds here. But anyways, it
No,
was a
and
good trade for both of us, and I think Klingberg
right.
will be good for you because now you're just like looking for useful assets, and obviously that third, unless you were going to trade it for Pacioretty, but like that third probably wasn't someone you were expecting to be too valuable.
No, I didn't need that. And yeah, I didn't mean to say that it was just so good for me. It was like you said, it was good for both of us. You got the cap space. And that's actually another part of my strategy with the league, the team that I built is I purposely left myself a ton of cap space so I could take on bad contracts. I could do exactly the deal I did with you to garner some assets. Cap flexibility is a very underrated part of cap leagues. Some people just kind of add to the max, and I'm not saying you guys, but sometimes people just add players just to add them, just to fill out their roster, and they don't leave themselves enough space, and it can be a problem because then you don't have the flexibility.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
that was good for everybody. You guys got well, you guys won, so I mean it obviously was good. But it was helpful, and yeah, I ended up dumping Cal Peterson and Matt Murray for a third, so I got out from those two guys bad contracts as well. But
Yeah, I'm surprised you pulled off some trades that I was like, I mean, I'm sure our league mates might be listening, but I'm like, you should have made Victor pay more to dump those two dead weight This was before Matt Murray went on LTIR. So maybe in hindsight, you
yeah,
didn't even need to dump Matt Murray because in our league, once
no,
you put the guy on IR, their contract doesn't count against your cap. But I feel like some of these trades, I was like, can people please like make it a little bit harder for Victor? I don't like how he was able to just dump those two contracts and all he had to do was give up a third.
it was interesting. I had a conversation with Adam, and he brought up a good point, which is that in these leagues, sometimes a very undervalued aspect is just kind of accepting a first offer, like just kind of, getting something that you want. If it doesn't, even if you don't get top value, if you wait and let someone shop around, you might not get the deal. Right. So sometimes it's just kind of worth it to accept, maybe not the best offer. And he's right. I mean, maybe I was trying to actually package those two within a larger deal to someone else. And so he ended up getting a draft pick for it's not going to cost him anything because he's trying to get to the floor. He's on a rebuilding team. So, anyways, it's just an interesting part. But yeah, I was surprised to be able to dump him for that little too. So the next big guy I got was Andrei Svechnikov. I got for Lucas Raymond and a late first, which was pretty nice. I traded this is one I'm not too happy about, but I got Ilya Mikheyev for Kirby Doc, and that was mainly because Kirby Doc wasn't doing much at the time,
And
and
this is like a
Mikheyev
year
was
ago. So some of these
yeah,
trades aren't that recent. Yeah. So
that one was a while ago, and that was because Mikheyev was actually doing something. In hindsight, I would like to have that one back, but that's okay. And then I got JJ Paterka and Thomas Harley for a late first and Nico Dawes. I think that's right after Dawes had a little bit of a run, which was kind of nice. And then I got OEL. This is the first one of the summer. I got OEL for a third round draft pick, and that's when there was still, I guess, the GM there was still thinking that his contract was going to be so huge, and he ended up kind of signing for much less, and so I kind of figured that would happen. So I got him at a discount, and so that's nice with him in Florida. Then I got Kuzmenko for Matthew Nyes and a third, which I mean, I still think Nyes is a good player, but Kuzmenko, I mean, come on, point per game player for relatively cheap. That's going to help me more right now. And then this was probably the biggest one. This is the one that involved Slavkovsky, Harley, Eklund, Zellweger, Spencer Knight, and Paterka and a first. And I got David Yurichek, Darcy Kemper, and Eric Karlsson at 50% retained.
yeah, I mean, you gave a huge pot to get those guys, but like Juracek's a good prospect anyway, so you can just cancel him out with, let's say, like Zellweger. Let's say Zellweger and Juracek cancel each other out, just to make things simple. I'm sure we could have a whole discussion of who's better between those two. But if you do that, yeah, you get your goalie in Kemper, who's solid. I think I actually described, we had a question on a patron cast recently where the question was kind of like, who's a player with like no ceiling and no floor, like just kind of like what you're going to get on both sides. And I was trying to think of one as a goalie just for fun, because it's like so hard, because goalies are always so like just crazy and very hard to predict. And the guy I came up with was Kemper. It was like, he's for sure not going to be terrible, and I feel like he's for sure not going to be awesome. He's going to be just fine, which is all you need in a league like this.
Yeah, and I didn't, like I mentioned earlier, the reason I couldn't win the first pick the last couple of years is I didn't have a goalie. I had Peterson in that trade with you. Before that, I kind of took on Matt Murray's contract just to, figured he might play some games. But other than that, I just had Dostal and Spencer Knight and some other prospects that weren't playing. And so it was like, I couldn't get games. I just needed guys to play, So, and then
yeah, Kemper will definitely play as long as he's healthy.
Exactly. He will play. But that
And
was
Erik
a big one.
Karlsson.
And then Karlsson, yeah, I mean, namesake of the podcast here. And I mean, obviously, the team that retained on him didn't care about the cap either. They're going to be trying to get to the floor, and so he doesn't care about that contract. And we can all debate about, Karlsson, and I think it's obviously it's a little bit of a gamble because we don't know where he's going. He's definitely leaving San Jose, but we don't know where he's going. But no matter where he ends up, I'm sure he's going to be good, right? Not as good as he was last year, probably, but he's going to be solid. And at whatever 5.5 million or whatever 6 million, he's definitely worth it in this league.
I mean, no doubt, right? Like we've been doing mock drafts and people are drafting Karlsson super high. So like especially if you're only thinking short term and like trying to win this year, then like that's all you need to do, right? And then like anything else is gravy. And Karlsson's still got how many more years left on this contract? So 4 more years, and I will be paying 5.5 basically mil. So we'll see. Yeah, I'll be interesting to see where he goes. I guess you probably now are hoping he doesn't go to like Carolina or even like Pittsburgh. Like I guess because those are the two rumored teams, and they both already have power play quarterbacks. So I guess it'll be interesting to see what they do. But back when he was on San Jose with Brent Burns, it didn't go so well for Erik Karlsson in terms of his total points. But that might have also been more due to injury than anything else. But you're the Sharks fan here. What's your take on Erik Karlsson? Like, what are you predicting? I mean, obviously, it's so hard without knowing where he's going to go. But health-wise, he played all the games last year, so that's something.
He was awesome, but also everything ran through him. And when everything runs through you, you're able to rack up a whole bunch of points. But obviously that team was garbage, and it was amazing how he was able to score so much with very little help. It's definitely going to go down when he's not the focal point. I mean, wherever he goes, it's going to be a good team, and he's not going to be the focal point of the offense, and he's going to have to spread around the points. But then again, he's also going to be around better players, and he's incredible when he's surrounded by talent. So I think he's going to be just fine. I think he still has the 60 plus or more. He's probably going to be in that 60 to 70 point range with, decent perif. So if you look at $5.5 million defenseman, he's for sure going to be the best of that group, I would say.
Yeah. So now I'm looking at your team, this team that I used to think had like all the best prospects. Like, so obviously Connor Bedard is your best prospect. And then you actually got also Simon Edvinsson in a trade, which I didn't get.
That was that was the other one I was going to mention. So
the last trade, that one.
The last one is I got Thatcher Demko, Eetu Luostarinen, who's a really good cost controlled asset in the Florida Panthers team. And then Simon Edvinsson and a second. And I gave Byfield, Miroshnichenko, Christian Kyrou, Vehvilainen, and a first. So some really, Byfield, obviously super high on him. We'll talk about in the prospect draft. I took him, very high. So a little sad to see him go. But, I just recorded our LA Kings episode for Fantasy Hockey Life today, and we were talking about how he just hasn't really hit that potential. And that's why they signed PLD, right? So they have PLD, Danault, Kopitar. Like, Byfield is not going to be a center in that system. He's hopefully going to play the wing and gets to somewhere near his potential. But you look at Edvinsson, who's about to step into a role with the Red Wings. He's going to be able to be flexed up and down from the minor system. You see him and Juracek, there's guys that are going to be able to be moved up and down. That's huge for this league too. And then of course I got Thatcher Demko, who, him with Kemper, and then I have Dostal as well. Like, that's going to be a tough goalie tandem or trio to beat this year. I think I'm going to be pretty good in goal, going from being kind of bad and not having any goalies to being pretty set.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Like, it's kind of like, I'm in this league and I respect all the managers, and I don't want to say anything too critical, but like, I don't know how you pulled off that trade. That's like, I don't know what you said to the other manager, but like Simon Edvinsson, from everything I see, is like one of the top rated D prospects out there. And you got him and Demko, who might be one of the more valuable goalies in our league, where like we care a lot about volume. There's only 3 goalie categories, and 2 of them are volume. And like, what did you give up? Like Byfield, who to a lot of people already looks like a bust. Miroshnichenko is like whatever, nothing compared to Edvinsson, as far as I'm concerned. And Christian Kyrou, he's fine. I don't know. You. That was a good one, Victor. I'd love to read the chat transcript for that trade and see how you pulled that off. Because I've been trying to get Demko off this manager actually is taking over from a team. Like, there was another manager of this team before, and I was like messaging them about Demko like all the time, and he like wouldn't budge. And now you got Demko for and Edvinson. Oh my gosh. Anyway.
Well, what was interesting about that is part of it was I was actually trying to send Murray and Peterson to that team. So we're having all these discussions and pieces were moving around and I was adding things to it. And he was like, nah. And then I came back and was like, well, what if I take Murray and Peterson out? And he's like, sold. So it's one of those things where it seemed worse and it was. And then I was able to move those other pieces in a separate deal. And it just looks so much better in comparison. Right. But I think, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm happy with it. And he's decided to tear it down. So he doesn't worry so much about the cap. I mean, I think, obviously those guys are a little bit younger, but he's, those pieces hopefully will be good for him. I don't want to say like I fleeced him or anything, but I think he got a good return. Maybe it could have been better, but I think he did all right.
I think that trade would be more even if you didn't get Edvinson. I think just getting Demko for that seems pretty reasonable.
He didn't want to give Edvinson. I did talk him into that.
So that's why you host 2 podcasts about prospects, and now I think you're gonna probably win this league next year. So I hope people are enjoying this. By the way, just a reminder. This is a last minute podcast episode here, and Victor has come on, and I think it's interesting. I'm having a great time having this conversation. Maybe it's a little bit self-indulgent, but I'm having a good time. But if you don't like this one, Brian and I will be back with our red boys, blue boys, or what am I talking about? Red boys, green boys, part 2 next week, and Victor and I will do a podcast where we won't talk so much about our leagues in in a month, I guess, when we talk about Calder candidates for next year. Anyways, Brian always like blames me. Actually, if Brian was here right now, he'd be rolling his eyes and being like, stop telling people that, or like being concerned that people don't like the podcast. But I don't know, I feel like I just remember back when we first started keeping Karlsson, like way back in the day, and then we posted on Reddit like the episodes, and like the main feedback we got was like, don't talk about your leagues so much, like we don't care. And now it's just you and I talking about. But I don't know, it's like I'm fascinated by this rebuild you did, because it's just not what I expected. I just really thought your whole thing was going to be, I'm going to suck, and then I'm going to get a lot of good prospects, and then they're going to become good one day, and then I'll be good one day. I didn't realize your plan was to suck, get a lot of prospects, and then trade them all for pros in one summer. So,
well, I think I think try to make it relevant to everyone. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because it's not just, you have to remember, it's not just how you value all these players, it's how everyone else does. And I had some conversations with GMs that echoed exactly what you said, Elan, is like, well, I'm not interested in Byfield. Like, he's kind of a bust. And I was like, all right, move on. Like, no,
yeah, you just need one.
Don't talk to him, because that's not going to help. Right. And so, yeah, you find someone who values them similarly or even higher. And you just have to realize that other people might value certain players more than you do. Other people might value cap space. They might value certain positions. And that's what's great about Dynasty, is there, especially with 20 teams, there's so much more flexibility and ability to move guys around depending on who's in what stage or situation. And so that's what I really like too, is that if we're all trying to do the same thing, which I find is often true in redraft, it can be hard, right? It can be hard to move certain pieces, but it's not so hard in this league. And I think you're right about, going into this year when a few teams are kind of trying to rebuild, it's going to be really interesting. Like, those of us that are competing are going to be trying to pick pieces off of them, but those teams also need certain pieces later to win their consolation bracket. So it's all like this really interesting, circle of like people valuing assets kind of differently at different times.
Sorry, I was muted the whole time. Damn. Sorry. Yeah, I'm still learning a lot, to be honest. Like, I've been in this league now 3 years, and like, even though I've won it twice, but it's been like going for it. And like, I like really did not expect to be going into this season with so many tanking teams, because I've like kind of filled, because we have like 26 pro roster spots, and then whatever it is, 25 maybe 30 prospects, and I kind of like am full, right? Like, for my pros, like there's a lot of like good players now available for trade, and even if I wanted to trade like picks or whatever to get some of these good pros that are available, like I literally can't fit them on my team. Like, I'd have to trade other pros away, and like I was like fine with that at the end of last season. Like, I was like looking at, like, Maddie and I were looking at our team at the end of last season where we won, and we were like, I think we could win again. Like, why not? Like, our team's even better than it was last year. We've made a couple trades over the offseason. Like I said, we got Pacioretty. We traded for David Perron. Like, I don't know, we've made a couple. Oh, we just traded for Vanacek. We gave a couple picks for Vanacek, which, I figured like Vanacek is like a tricky one, because I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, you dummy, like he's about to lose the job to Shmi. Did you watch the playoffs last year? But I figured for the price I paid, a couple later picks, well, a second and a third, but like you, I'm hoping they're going to be like the 40th overall and 60th overall picks. This is a 20-team league, by the way. So to give context. So, if you win, then your first round pick is 20th. Anyway, what was it? Oh yeah, Vanacek. Oh, just to finish that thought, like there is still a chance also. And that's another, by the way, general dynasty thing that I didn't realize going into it like 3 years ago. Goalies are like really valuable. And I know on the podcast generally, I'm always like, forget about goalies. Like you can get some in free agency, like in redraft leagues. I'm always like kind of a proponent of like, don't even really like spend a lot of capital on goalies because they're so like variable, like that you don't even know who's going to be good and who's going to be bad. So why waste a high pick? The problem in dynasty leagues is there's never any goalies available in free agency. Like literally every goalie that's in the league is like rostered except for like a Scott Wedgwood or something sometimes. And so goalies are valuable, and especially like a starter. And so anyways, just to say that Vanacek might lose the job, but for the price I paid, I'll take a chance on a goalie that could also just be the starter on like an amazing team. Like New Jersey's looking good last year, or next year. So anyways, that's the reason for that. But anyways, back to my original point, which was that I have no spots left and I kind of like all my players. Like I don't have any like contracts that I'm trying to dump or anything. Like I like my team. And now all of a sudden we're in this environment where there's like 10 teams that have announced on our Discord that like, oh, so I'm tearing down, like I'll take like anything for any of my pros, come at me like with any offer. And I'm like, oh man, like if I knew this was going to be the case, I wouldn't have made trades that I made earlier, or I wouldn't have picked up all the players that I picked up. Anyway, so that's still what I'm learning right now, is I didn't consider this possibility that you could be in a league where all of a sudden like everyone is kind of tanking, or like 10 of the 20 teams are tanking, and you're going to have your pick of pros if you want, and probably a cheaper price because there's like, the market is so now flush with teams that are willing to just give players up.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And one of the biggest things that I think sometimes overlooked too is roster flexibility. Like, especially in a league where you can move guys up and down, like being locked in to just the guys on your pro roster can be very limiting, right? So sometimes even if you're not trying to dump a guy, maybe you just move on from the guys near the bottom of your roster production wise and just fill them in with some guys that are producing in the minors, right? So guys you can kind of flex up and down, or just be able to add somebody. This isn't really a streaming league. You only have 30 ads per year. So you can't really do too much streaming, but giving yourself a little bit of flexibility is sometimes good. And of course, guys are going to get injured, so you have a little bit there, but kind of stuffing your roster too much can also have its downsides too, to some extent.
Yeah, no, for sure. And basically this has been my strategy all 3 years though. And it's actually worked out pretty well, is I've gone into like each season pretty much with like 26 pros for the 26 roster spot, just because injuries like happen so often. Like you kind of said it as an offhanded thing, but I've had situations where I've had like 5, 6, like 7 players on my IR. We have a 10-person IR. I've had my IR filled with 10 people like so many times. And so I just figure like I have a lot of actually swing eligible prospects. Swing eligible kind of means that, like Victor was saying, like anyone in your prospect team, you could actually bring up and play on your pro team and then bring them back down to your minors whenever you want. And you could even then drop these people before they turn into pros. It's after 82 games that they become pros, and you can drop them beforehand without having to worry about like having to buy them out or something. And I have a bunch of these guys that I'm excited about. Like, I'm especially excited about like a Tommy Novak who I picked up last year, and I know I've mentioned Voronkov before. I think he's going to be a guy on Columbus who's probably gonna be really good for bangers leagues. And I mean, I could give a list later. But my plan is just to have my 26 pros, and then I've got my like next group ready to go as soon as I have injuries, so I don't have to worry about wasting my ads in free agency trying to just replace injuries. I've got my people in place. But I've been burned by that before, as I think I whined about on a Patreon cast or on the podcast, that whole Chris Drieger debacle last year, where he came back and lost his IR status after the trade deadline. And we had a 4 goalie maximum, and I was already at 4 goalies. And all of a sudden it was like, what do I do with this guy? He's coming back, and now I don't have room for him, and I don't have anything I could do. So I ended up having to just drop him and buy him out, take the penalty, live and learn. Okay. Anyways, what was my point here? Oh yeah, but you were saying, you do make a good point that generally you do want to have that flexibility. Another thing is like, I feel like if you're going for it, especially this year when like not even that many teams are going for it, who even cares about the regular season, right? Like my plan is just, even if I can't use any of my swing guys all season long, it's fine. All that matters is that come playoff time, like come the trade deadline, if I realize that I have too many pros, I'll make trades then. But for now, I don't even I don't need to win the President's Trophy. So I'd rather just have like the most players to be ready to go no matter who gets injured.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Everything's still good on your end? I saw you had some visitors and some.
Oh yeah, that's okay.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is off the air. I'll edit this out. But like, yeah, where do you want to go next here? Do you
Well,
want
maybe
to
let's.
go to the
Do you
look
want to
back?
look at the pro or you want to look at the prospects? So, yeah, let's look back. Yeah, it's a good time
Okay.
to do that. Wait, you're muted. I don't know.
Sorry about that. All right. Well, we are about halfway through the pod here, Victor, and it's been a fun chat. I think the other big thing we wanted to do is look back on our prospect and pro drafts from way back in, what was it, 2020, 2019 when we started this league? I guess
2020.
3 seasons ago. What was it? Sorry.
2020.
Oh, right, 2020. So we were thinking we'll look back at that draft. Like I did take a lot of notes about like how I built my team and my strategies, but I feel like probably I've been talking about it on the podcast for the past few years. So I don't know if I need to like dive too much into it. Maybe at the end of the show, I can give some quick like strategies on if you want to be like go into a new dynasty league with a win now. There are a few things that I did that I think were like good general tips that you can use if you want to come into a new league and try to win right away, as opposed to Victor's strategy. But why don't we do now jump into these drafts? And I guess the prospect draft is the more interesting one. Back in the day, these were all players in 2020 that had played 82 games or less, and I guess 41 games or less for goalies. And that's really crazy looking at the draft results, especially first overall pick. Oof, big swing and a miss right there. Well, so far, it's still early in a lot of these players' careers, right? So it'll be actually you as the prospect expert can let us know if you still believe in first overall. He had just gone first overall in the actual NHL draft. Alexis Lafreniere. When you hear the other names, people, you're going to realize why I'm saying oof. But do you have hope for Lafreniere to live up to? Forget about being first overall in this draft, like first round, being a first round pick in this draft. Do you think he has the potential to at least meet that quality?
No, I don't. And I said at the time, I thought he was more like a 70, 60, 70 point guy. I do still have faith that he can do that, but that's not super interesting. And when you hear some of the other names, you're going to realize there's definitely better options in terms of guys that went soon after or long after him. Some guys that are much better than that. So yeah, definitely not that. And the second overall pick, Cale Makar, we can just spoil that. And I know a lot. That's who I wanted, but Greg was smart and took him, and he's obviously been amazing. So that was definitely a better pick.
I guess one thing to keep in mind as we go through this, like the players who had just been drafted, like because again, it's a salary cap league, right? So if you could get a player who's going to have 3 years on their ELC, that could like help you a lot in terms of staying under the cap. Like those 3 years are really valuable as opposed to Cale Makar, who had already played a bit and was probably about to sign, his big contract. So maybe that was one reason why Lafreniere could be a little bit more tempting than Makar at the time, just because you'd have a longer time with that cheap contract. But still, obviously, in hindsight, I'm sure that Chris would rather have that pick back. Then you picked third. Gotta say, another oof here, but it's worked out all right for you because you found one person interested in Quinton Byfield. So you held on long. I think if it was me, like I'm so impatient. Maddie knows, he's in the chat here, that as soon as there's a player that I I hate, given up on, like they're not doing what I hoped he would, I'm like, let's just trade this guy before like everyone realizes he sucks. But you were very patient with Quinton Byfield. But you were saying you still kind of believe in him. You like him better than Lafreniere at this point?
I always have, and I do still like him better. We knew that Byfield was going to take a long time. He's a big, really big dude. He was really young for the draft class too. He could have been a 21. And so he's good. We knew he was going to take some time. And then he broke his ankle really badly, and that messed up his development. So yeah, what's unfortunate is that it doesn't look like he's going to be a center, which might actually be good because the centers are really deep down there in LA. And so if he can play on the wing, maybe even with like Fiala or, PLD, then that'll be really good for him. And maybe he'll get a little bit more but his confidence has been kind of shaken a little bit. I think him pushing him to the wing makes him kind of feel a little bit like a failure too, and so I think he's still kind of rediscovering himself. But I still do think he's going to be good, and he is more physical, so he'll bring more of those peripheral stats, and maybe he'll win a lot of faceoffs even as a winger. So I still think he'll be pretty good, but yeah, definitely when you hear some of these other names, not compared to like probably would be like a third or fourth rounder if we redid it right now.
Yeah, and of course, like with Byfield, I feel like another way he's a little bit of a bust so far is just like last year he didn't really hit. I remember you were like excited about him when he was getting drafted because you were saying he was going to be like a multi-cat stud. You know, he's going to get points, he's going to get hits, and like he had like a hit per game last year, and he was actually getting like top line deployment with Kopitar and Kempe for a lot of the year, but like wasn't really shooting. Like 1.4 shots per game overall in the season. So yeah, but also the other thing is he's 20 years old, which I think people don't realize. It feels like Byfield's been around already for a while, but 20 is like super young. Like I'm looking at some of my prospects that I'm excited about on my team, which there aren't that many of them. But like, you know, I have this guy Past a Job who I traded for, and like he's only 20. He hasn't even played a game yet in the league. And like he's someone that I'm hoping is gonna do something for me one day. He's on Anaheim. Even like Minchukov and Marco Kasper, who Maddie and I traded for. One of our one rare trades where we traded like a pro for prospects was we needed to clear some space. So last summer we traded Jacob Chikrin, and we got, I think, a pretty good haul of prospects. We got this 9th and 10th pick in that draft where we ended up taking Kasper and Minchukov, and then we also got Justice Anunin. So that was like kind of the three prospects we got. He's the goalie on Colorado who eventually should hopefully take over. I mean, nothing's for sure. We thought Caden Primo was going to take over Montreal, and that hasn't happened yet. But Anunin had a good year last year. But anyway, my point is that even like my like recently drafted guys, like Minchukov is 19 and Byfield is 20. So it's just like for people who are disappointed in him, I guess that's one thing to keep in mind, that like a lot of players like wouldn't have even played a game yet. So he's hopefully just being developed the right way. Because I guess you could also, the other way you could look at it is like they ruined him. They should have had him in the AHL dominating this whole time, and they blew it. And now his confidence is shot, like you were saying. So we'll see. It'll be interesting what happens with Byfield. But like, would you even draft him this year in the Cupful? So, oh yeah, we should mention our other stuff. But like, yeah, like the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League I didn't mention at the start is like registration is open. It's gonna be awesome next year, and it's a 1-year league. Victor also has a league, by the way. So we'll talk about all that, I guess, later. But like, there's a dynasty league that you can join as part of the Fantasy Hockey Life patron program. But anyway, my question is, would you even draft Byfield? Let's say you're in the 18th round of the Cupful and you're grabbing like your like final picks. Is he even someone that interests you at all for next year, or is this just like maybe one day, but definitely not next year?
I think probably just more as a free agent ad and redraft. Yeah. I probably wouldn't draft him and just kind of wait and see, because it depends on deployment. He could, like you say, he could be up there, but there's no guarantee. And unfortunately, the LA looks really good, but they look really good because they have a top 9, you know, which is not necessarily what you want so much in fantasy, unless you're Kevin Fiala or playing with Fiala, then it's maybe a little less exciting.
Okay, so the next pick, so remember, was Lafreniere, then Makar, then Byfield. And it's probably hard for people to remember, like at this point in 2020, like which players, because this draft was like people were taking the players who had just been drafted in 2020. And then also like all these players who had already been in the NHL but had played less than 82 games were also eligible in this draft. So next up was Quinn Hughes, who is ended up like he was taken by Shane and Adam, Taiwan Typhoons, who ended up basically like Maddie and I have played them the past 2 years in the finals, and they won 2 years ago, and then we won last year. They've been our main nemesis, and they did really well with this Quinn Hughes pick. And I'm not necessarily saying because of picking Quinn Hughes. They made a great trade, got a huge return for him. Hughes, I feel like also is kind of a little bit of a bust here, just because like he's been so good, but this is a categories league, and he really only contributes to assists and power play points. And like last year, he did a little bit better in peripherals and took a few more shots. And maybe there is still room for him to grow. But like, even if Quinn Hughes is like a point per game guy, I think if you rank the defensemen in this league by the Fantrax ranking, I don't know how much you want to trust Fantrax ranking, but he's like way down the list, even though he had a lot more points, a lot of people ahead of him, just because he's not contributing in so many of the categories, like no hits, no blocks, no shots. So no goals really. So I think it's a bust of a pick, but obviously Taiwan made very good use of it. I'll just say they ended up trading him in a deal that ended up netting them a 50% retained Ovechkin and Marchand 2 years ago, and then they ended up winning the whole league that year. And I'm sure that trade played a huge part in it. And I remember being so mad. But Victor, you
Yeah.
should have vetoed that trade. Come on.
I mean, I definitely would have rather had Quinn Hughes in hindsight. I could have probably pulled off a good trade. No,
Yeah.
but that's definitely I think it's a good trade. You get good value. And yeah, I even though I agree, like he isn't necessarily in terms of the category coverage, not as good. But I think, Lafreniere and Byfield were definitely the top five here that weren't as good. And because especially when you hear the next six picks, they're all really good, basically, including a bunch of goalies.
Yeah. So we could just run through them. You wanted to say like these next six?
Yeah. So then Thatcher Demko went fifth, Ilya Shostorkin went sixth, Sorokin went seventh, Samsonov went eighth. So the big three Russian back to back to back. And I said at the time I was surprised that Demko was the first, and I still am surprised because I still think a few of those other guys are better. But obviously Demko's turned out really well. And then Kaprizov went after the goalies, Adam Fox, and then Jack Hughes was my 11th overall pick. So those all in a row are really good picks. Like they've all turned out to be amazing, top players for their teams, as you would expect in the first round.
Yeah, I mean Samsonov had a bit of a journey, right? Like he was waived by the Capitals, but now he's looking like someone you definitely want in fantasy. And we've been doing these mock drafts, on our Keeping Karlsson Discord, which have been a lot of fun just to kind of see the results. And Kevin just released this awesome spreadsheet. Kevin Abear, our couple coordinator, with like showing ADPs for the mock drafts. It's like really cool stuff that he's done. And anyways, Samsonov is going super late. All that to say, and like I feel like Toronto's still a really good team. Matt Murray is on LTIR. Like, there's no reason why Samsonov can't be like a top goalie in fantasy next year if he's a volume starter on a great team. Like, I know Wall is there and he seemed fine, but I think Samsonov is young and good. So like, it was a long journey, but now he definitely has a lot of fantasy value. I think going into next year, he was actually just involved in a trade that also was like a head scratcher to me. But I don't need to like keep banging off my head against these bad trades, not bad trades, but just trades that I don't know if I necessarily understand. But yeah, I think Samsonov is really good and still a little bit undervalued. So for those of you in dynasty leagues, maybe now's the time to try to get him. He's also so cheap, like the salary cap that he's holding is so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, obviously Shosturkin, Sorokin, nothing to say about them. Kaprizov, I guess like Kaprizov, like almost right away had a really high salary, but still like worth every penny. He's incredible. Yeah. And Jack Hughes for you. So that was pretty good to get Hughes falling all the way to 11th. This was after, right? He had already had a season, I believe.
It was a little underwhelming, right? That was his like 45-point season or whatever. Everyone was kind of like, oh, maybe he's a bust. And I always believed him. I said at the time he's going to be 100-point player. And I don't think he actually hit that number, but was on that pace, right? So he's definitely, but we all know he's kind of a superstar now.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it was even worse than you're saying. In his rookie season, 1920, Jack Hughes played 61 games and had 21 points. This is after he had been picked first overall. So yeah, probably
a lot of people.
Right. Yeah,
his second season, he had the 45-point pace. So yeah, the first two seasons, people were kind of like, oh, he's not that good. And no, he definitely is.
Yeah, well, that was definitely your opportunity. By the way, after that second season, he was 20. And then since then, he's had 2 seasons where he's paced for like 100 points. So, I mean, I'm not even a big Byfield believer. I'm just pointing out how young 20 is. That Jack Hughes also had a couple bad seasons. Okay, so yeah, that was a great pick. Then a bit of a bust here in Elvis Merzlikins. So I don't get what happened with him. He seemed so good, and then I guess the thing is he might be a value guy for drafts next year.
Yeah,
just because Columbus is looking a lot better, right? They just traded for all new defensemen. They have Provorov, they have Severson.
They had so many injuries. It was insane last year. And remember, people forget, but his best friend died in that tragic 4th of July accident. He put a lot of pressure on himself to, be good for Mats Kivlenieks this past season. And there was so much going on around him. It was a tire fire with injuries and new defensemen. So I think I agree. Merzlikins could be a really good bounce back this year. Columbus just looks so stacked now, and they have really great prospects maturing. Like they're going to have, and Fantilli's there. They're going to be a good team.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, Merzlikins lost the starting job to Korpisalo last year up until the time that Korpisalo got traded, but that was not something anyone was expecting. So I guess as long as like Merzlikins can hold up, he could be a good, like a goalie on a good team. The question is just, can he bounce back? And I think there's reasons to believe he can, because yeah, like you said, the defense was bad, but though Korpisalo seemed just fine, even with all the defense being injured and him playing behind the guys that he did. Since we're talking prospects with the prospect expert here, what do you think of Tarasov, who I assume is going to be the backup going into next season? He's super young, 24. I know he's a kind of a high pedigree guy. Do you think there's a chance that Tarasov can steal the net from Merzlikins and potentially, like, or just in general, just like how valuable do you think Tarasov is in dynasty leagues at this point?
He's really good. I have him ranked as my 11th prospect goalie. I think he's really high up there. I don't think he's going to take over the net. I think that he needs a little bit more time, but he's pretty NHL ready. I think he's going to play some games. He's going to learn a lot from Elvis, and maybe another couple of years he'll get 30-40 starts or so, but he's very good. He just needs a little bit more time, and Elvis is already there ready. So I don't see him stealing starts, but he's definitely a good candidate to know that when he steps in, he has potential. He has starter upside. And certainly if Elvis goes down and the team is better, I think he could have pretty decent value. And he's someone that I would definitely target, Danil Tarasov, if you can get him in a dynasty league. I think he's a good target.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious to ask you. One of my, again, like few good prospects is the St. Louis backup going to next year, Joel Hofer, who I actually was looking back on how I got him because I didn't even remember. I'm pretty proud of this trade, Victor. This was like one strategy that I've used in these dynasty leagues, which I guess is like pretty standard, to try to sell high. That's not even for dynasty leagues, right? But like if you have a player, but especially I find if you have a player who's about to be a UFA and he's going to get a high salary, I like to try to trade that player away like before he signs his contract, because maybe people aren't realizing like how crazy it's going to be. And that's actually come to bite me a bit this year, because I expected like Bertuzzi and Klingberg and these guys like signed big contracts, and like I dropped Bertuzzi and you picked him up, and I feel like a real dummy. But I just figured like he was stinking last year, and I was in a playoff race, right? And I ended up winning, so I can't have too many regrets. But like he was taking up a space on my team that I thought, like Maddie and I thought we had better use for than Bertuzzi. Wasn't doing anything, and also we were able to clear the cap space. But I just figured, like, why would I keep him? Because probably he's going to end up signing like a 7-year, $8 million per year deal or something, and I'm not going to keep him anyways. Then he signs for 1 year in Toronto. So I don't know. This past offseason has been like Tarasenko just signed for like a 1-year deal for $5 million. Like Tarasenko would have been another type of guy I would try to trade with the same strategy in mind. So maybe I have to rethink it. But this one worked out well for me because I traded Mason Marchment after he had that big breakout in Florida. And then he ended up signing this like long-term deal with Dallas. And we saw last year, like, he didn't repeat that. He didn't even come close. I don't even know if he's someone I would have wanted out of free agency if he was on a 1-year deal. He only had a 37-point pace. So yeah, I traded Marchment for Joel Hofer at the time, and he was someone I was planning on dropping anyway. So all that to say, and I'm being very long-winded, Hofer versus Tarasov, both guys who are going to kind of be backups, but I think have potential to steal the job. Especially considering Merzlikins and Binnington were so bad last year. Who would you like better between the two?
Definitely Hofer, and has nothing to do with the fact that you have him, but I definitely like Hofer. I think he has a pretty good chance to pull a Binnington, actually, on Jordan Binnington. I think he's really good. His 6 starts were really up and down, but he showed that he could hang at the NHL level, and he was really good in AHL last year. The main issue, I think, is that the salary that Binnington has pretty much commands him to be a starter, but I think Hofer is better. I have him as my 8th ranked goalie in my prospect rankings, and I think he's really, really good and the future starter. It's just a matter of what to do with Binnington in his contract as that starts to not look so good. Binnington has trended down every single year and pretty much every metric since he won the cup and had that crazy, insane Cinderella season.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to even look too much at the underlying numbers to know that Binnington hasn't been that good lately. I know you just recently had what's his name, Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown's a player in the NHL. You had someone from.
Yeah,
was that also his name?
That's also his name. Yeah,
it was something Brown. Okay, yeah, you had Patrick Brown, the St. Louis Blues beat writer, and he seemed.
Oh no, he's Arizona. We had Luke Korak on for St. Louis.
Ah, right. Okay, my mistake. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, he seemed kind of high on Binnington. But I guess he's like, he's the team's beat writer, so maybe he's trying to be optimistic. But he said that like he feels like this year Binnington will turn it around. And what was it that he said? Something like when it's tough, when it's like there's a lot of pressure on him, that's when he does the best, or something along those lines.
Yeah, he's mentally, pretty stubborn and strong. The other thing I just wanted to mention, that as you mentioned with Tyler Bertuzzi, again, another reason why you leave yourself cap space. you dropped Tyler Bertuzzi, and not a lot of people could pick him up because of his big salary. But since I had the space, I picked him up, and then you just kind of see what happens with guys like that, right? Like
Mhm.
I didn't know that his salary was going to come in so low, but I picked up a bunch of guys like Klingberg and him and OEL, and you see what happens with their salary, and then come July 1st, and magically their salary goes down when they resign, and you're like, yes. And if they don't, you just drop them, right? Because that's the way it works in this league. If they sign a new contract, you can drop them before it kicks in, but you have to have that flexibility in your cap to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. No, that was a good move. And that was like, even if like I shouldn't have dropped Bertuzzi. Like, sorry, Maddie. That was a mistake. But we don't really have room for him. I like all the players on my team, like I said. So I don't even know who I would drop to make room for Bertuzzi this year. Though if he's going to be like on the top power play on Toronto, obviously maybe then I'll regret that. But especially
Someday.
if there's an injury. Yeah. We'll see how things go for Bertuzzi in Toronto. Here's another random like strategy I'll say. So one strategy I was saying was trade those UFAs, pending UFAs, like before they sign, which might be a good or a bad strategy, but it's something I've been doing. Another one that I liked was, sometimes when a player signs a contract, but it's like they still have 1 year left in their current contract before like the next one will kick in. I feel like sometimes it's really good to like make a trade for one of those players, because I think the manager will think like, look at that crazy next contract and how like insane it is and how no way I'm going to want that guy. But maybe forgetting the fact that in our league anyways, we can drop someone like in between their contracts, right? So like the example here is like I traded for Seth Jones back when like he still had 1 year left on his deal when he got traded to Chicago, and then like he signed like, what is it, like 8 years, like 9 million, some crazy contract. Like no one would want him, probably. I think, I don't know, maybe now with Bedard, maybe he's a little more interesting to people in Dynasty, but he had like a year left still with the cheap salary. And I remember we got him actually for pretty cheap. And like, it was like, I considered him a rental. Like my plan was just to like have him for that year. And then I was going to, drop him or try to trade him. So that's another like thing to maybe go for. If someone's just signed a crazy contract, but they're still like under their cheap contract, then maybe the manager is just like, so like, ugh, this is terrible. I want to dump this guy. So actually looking at what the trade was, I ended up getting Seth Jones for Matt Dumba back a couple summers ago, and like turned out good. Like and then I actually ended up flipping. Okay, here's another strategy then for Dynasty Leagues I'll throw out there. This is like probably the number one obvious like win now strategy, is like people really undervalue the older players, because everyone's like thinking like, oh, if the player's old, like whatever, especially if this team doesn't think they're going to win now, they're like, oh, this guy's useless to me. So I ended up trading Seth Jones and a second later on, and I got Pavelski and Malkin. And they've been good. Like they're older guys, but they've still been really good each year since I've gotten them.
That was a good one.
And I expect them both to be good next year. Like Pavelski's like 58 years old, I think, or like, whatever, 38, yeah. 39. And Malkin is not getting any younger, but I still expect them to be like key players for my team. And, I traded my Seth Jones, who I was planning on dropping anyways, in a second. So, but anyway,
and on the other end of that, if you're a team that has the cap flexibility, you take Seth Jones and you retain and flip him to another contending team. You couldn't do that because you didn't have the cap flexibility, and it was going to be difficult for you. But a rebuilding team should absolutely do that, because you give Seth Jones at 50%, that's all of a sudden an immensely valuable player.
Yeah, now's a good time to try to do that, because people are probably super excited about him with Bedard coming in. But I'm still like not super sold on Seth Jones. I wonder like if who's the guy, Korchinski, who they drafted, like how long is it going to be before Korchinski like takes his spot on the top power play?
Probably a couple of years.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, Seth Jones, yeah, at that contract, no way. But at half, oh yeah,
maybe.
That's good. That's good
value. Yeah. And he's also good for the peripherals for sure. Can I throw a random? This is always when I have you on the show. I just want to throw random prospects at you who I have on my team. I added out a free agency. Oh, another strategy, if you're trying to win and you trade all your picks for pros, like Maddie and I have been doing these past few years, is you really want to be watching free agency closely and trying to get those, diamonds in the rough. Like, there are still prospects that kind of, didn't have high draft pedigrees and no one really noticed. And then all of a sudden they're doing well in the minors, and then they turn out to actually be something. And like this past year, a good example is not Danny, what's his name? He's like my top guy. I don't even know his name. Oh, Tommy Novak. Who was a total nobody, and he got called up by Nashville. And generally my strategy has been like, I just kind of add it's not like you said, we have 30 moves, which isn't that much, but pretty much I use the majority of my 30 moves to just add these like players who get called up from the minors because they're minors eligible, they're free to drop, and like you never know what could happen, especially someone who was like doing well in the AHL. Like Novak had been doing well in the AHL, and I saw he was called up. I was like, I'll give him a shot. I think like Nashville had an injury at the time, so he was getting good deployment. And now who knows what he'll do, but he had like a 60 something point pace last year. And I'm curious to see what he can do now in a full season with the Preds. But anyways, another random. Yes, that was just like my general advice is like what you have to, if you're trying to win now, you could still get prospects. You have to be extra careful, be following all the right people and keep up with everyone who's you know, like I keep mentioning this guy Voronkov. All I see is that like he's going to come to Columbus and he's going to get like a million hits, and he might even, you know, he was even scoring some goals in the KHL last year wherever he was playing. But anyways, the guy I wanted to ask about is Alex Vlasic. I grabbed him out of free agency at the end of last year, and he's like a D prospect for Chicago. See anything?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me about Novak. Yeah. Alex Vlasic, who, yes, he is related to Mark-Edward Vlasic, cousin, I believe. And yeah, he's definitely a banger. And he did play a bunch of NHL games a couple seasons ago, and then he was kind of strictly in the minors. And then he actually got a couple this year. And I think he was trying to work on his play driving because he's a little slower. He's much bigger than Mark-Edward, but not as good of a skater. So he struggles a little bit with some of the pace. But he's definitely, I think, someone who could be like a bottom pairing. He's very physical. He's huge, 6'6", 200 pounds. And he's already shown he can play a little bit in the league and was pretty good for in the AHL. Not someone who's going to score a lot, but his peripheral coverage should be good. So while he's on that ELC, yeah, definitely Alex Vlasic will give you some stats, and then once he graduates, he's probably someone you just drop.
Yeah, especially if he's like one of these guys that's like good in real life but not good for fantasy, and then he gets like a good contract, like the guy Samuelson on Buffalo who we were talking about offline. It's like Buffalo gave him a big contract, and I was like, who is this guy? Because like, you know, I'm mainly like a fantasy person, but apparently under the hood he's like a really valuable player, but
Yeah.
not anyone should be interested in a fantasy league.
No.
But yeah, we did actually have a question, like since you thought I was going to be asking you about Novak. Ryan asked if I could ask you about the Preds and their youth movement. He was like saying, aside from Novak, it's kind of unclear how all these young guys are going to fit in and what we can expect from them. Is there anyone in particular that, I guess Luke Evangelista, is he kind of like the main top prospect on the Preds right now?
It's interesting between him and Tomasino. There's a couple of decent guys, but actually the one that I keep hearing the most about, and from people I talk to that I trust, I think it's Juuso Parssinen. I think that guy is really good. And everyone, you know, we had Brian Baston on who runs a site there on the Forecheck, and he just talked so glowingly about Parssinen. What I really liked about what he said is that, you know, a lot of these guys, like Tomasino is really fast, like Evangelista has, you know, pretty good shot and playmaker, but like Parssinen can do everything. First of all, he's got good size. He's not small. He's 6'3", 212. He's a little bit slow, but he's got great hands. He's got an amazing shot. He can snipe goals. He can also set up plays. He's got really good vision. So he's not limited to just one thing. He can score in lots of different ways. He just needs a little bit more opportunity and time on ice, and he can do more than what he did. He had a 46-point pace this past season. Most of those were assists, but you give him a little bit better deployment, and I definitely think that he could do something with it. Remember, Forsberg missed a lot of time, and after he was out, he played a lot with some Cody Glass and Zach Sanford and Jakov Trenin, Cole Smith. Who are these guys? Yeah, exactly. So give Juuso Parssinen a little bit more to work with, which I think he will get this year, and I think that he could really pop off. And that's something Brian was saying, and I definitely trust what he says. He's a smart dude.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting prospects here. Like you said, so Evangelista, Parssinen. I still kind of consider Cody Glass a prospect because he's 24 now. Maybe he doesn't count anymore. But, you know, last year he finally got his first opportunity. He did decently. Yeah, Tomasino. So they're going to be an interesting team next year. And they have Philip Forsberg coming back, and they signed Ryan O'Reilly. And they still have the best goalie maybe in the league, and UC Saros or among
pound
them.
For pound. Or
definitely
inch
pound
for
for
inch.
pound.
He's definitely the best.
Yeah, they also have one of the best defensemen in the league, and Roman Josi, and they have Ryan McDonough, who's a good, like, you know, shutdown kind of guy. So I don't know. I feel like Nashville could be surprising next year, but it all depends on like if these young guys can step up and actually be contributors for a full season. But they're gonna be a fun team to watch. Okay, I guess we were going through that draft. Once again, everybody, normally, you know, there's a podcast with a lot of prep. We have a full plan here. We're going off the cuff. I think it's actually one of the best podcasts. that I've done. But just saying, for anyone who's thinking right now, they're like, why is Elan talking about Preds prospects when just a second ago we've only gone through 12 of the first 12 picks of this prospects draft. Reminder, Lafreniere, Makar, Byfield, Hughes, Quinn Hughes, I should say, Demko, Shesterkin, Sorokin, Samsonov, Kaprizov, Adam Fox, Jack Hughes, Merzlikins. Let's at least go through the rest of this first round. So next up at 13th, Nick Suzuki was taken. That's worked out pretty well, though he has a big contract, but can't complain with him. Adam Boqvist went next. I still remember, when people thought he had a high pedigree, but that's kind of gone down.
Yeah, that was kind of a bust, I would say, including the next one. I took Kirby Doc, and I struggled with myself because I really didn't necessarily want to take him, but I was a little bit swayed by some of the opinions I was reading at the time. And I mean, he's obviously come around and he still has some upside, but I traded him, so whatever. But he definitely didn't work out as good as some of the other ones that are taken right after this. Like Marco Rossi went 16. Still don't know about him, but still potential. I mean, he got COVID really bad and almost died. So, he's thankfully still playing and healthy. And then at 17, Tim Stutzla, that's looking really good for Jordan and Kalen. And then Kako went 18th. Yeah, still, I'm still skeptical that he's going to turn out to be anything. And then Trevor Zegras went 19th. And then who, pray tell, went 20th overall, Elan?
Yeah, look, I won the first year and I won the third year. So I feel like you can't make fun of me too much. But Maddie was like we didn't do well in this prospect draft. We did really well, I think, in the pro draft, and then we made trades and whatever. But we did not make any good picks. I actually have one question I wanted to ask you here. Is there anyone that I took in this prospect draft that you'd be interested in? But yeah, we went with Cal Peterson at 20, who at the time everyone was like, oh my God, I can't believe you got him. I really wanted him. We got trade. I'm pretty sure we had a trade offer of Kaprizov at one point that I was like, Kaprizov and what? Come on now. Goalies are worth a lot. Also, in that first year in the pro draft, we had only taken 2 goalies because I was really big on this in my head. You don't need pro goalies, right? You don't need goalies at all because you just get them out of free agency, because I'd never been in Dynasty League before. So we only drafted Ullmark, who was in a tandem in Buffalo at the time, and Thomas Greiss, who was, I don't even remember. I guess he was on the Islanders still at the time, maybe. Anyway,
we had that season. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we ended up drafting a bunch of goalies in the prospects draft, and they were Peterson, and later on Francouz, Kevin Lankinen, who actually ended up being really good that year, was a big part of our win. That was the year when he randomly came to Chicago and was doing stuff. Joey Decord, who we still have on our team. There's not many players from this draft that I still have, but Decord, actually, I'm kind of excited for next year. He's going to be the backup on Seattle. He just had a good playoffs. And Sam Montembeau, who maybe I gave up on too soon. So we took a bunch of goalie prospects, and they all kind of stunk. And no one stunk worse than Cal Peterson, because not only did he stink, but he signed a big contract that I ended up having to pay to dump. And I got so many good trade offers that we turned down because we kept on thinking he was going to be good. You thought he was going to be really good. I remember you would talk about him and how he was going to, you even got paid for a cameo at one point and played it on your podcast.
Yeah, no, I was right there. I was right there with you. I mean, I wouldn't have taken him that high, but I definitely was in the camp that I definitely thought Peterson was going to be much better than he is now. So I mean, I don't really blame you for that pick. I think it was earlier than I would have taken him, but I think in the first 2-3 rounds, he would have gone for sure. No doubt. Someone was going to take him relatively early, and you guys ended up doing it.
At the time, also, I was really big on and I was trying to convince Maddie, we're trying to win year one. I don't care. So I wanted our prospect picks to be guys who were going to play also that year and be swing eligible. So Cal Peterson was going to be the backup for Quick. And then the next pick, because then we had the flip around there, and we had 21st overall, and we took John Marino, a terrible pick, but he had just come off a really good rookie season with Pittsburgh. And looked like potentially he could be their top pairing guy. I don't know. I was high on him at the time. And
I have to say, this is one of the picks that we all made fun of so much at the time. But I think, as you can all hear, there were definitely just as bad or worse picks in that first round. So it was not a great pick, especially some of the guys that came after him. But I know you all guys also moved on from him relatively quickly, so it ended up not being so bad.
We ended up actually getting I forget what it was. We traded him and actually got something for him, which I was shocked about. I don't know what it was, but it was something somewhat useful, at least at the time. But yeah, that obviously I've been made fun of a lot about the John Marino pick, so we can just move on from there. Yeah, some good picks right afterwards, which yeah, I definitely feel a lot of regret as I see them now again. But yeah, Dylan Cousins went next, who had a huge breakout last year for Buffalo. What do you think about Buffalo? We had that question about the the Preds youth movement, but also like the Sabres have so many exciting young prospects. I guess you were talking about how you traded away Paterka, but like between Cousins.
No, I got Paterka. I got Paterka.
Oh, you got Paterka. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So you said there's him.
Oh,
There's
wait, no, I got him and then traded him. You're right. I actually did both within this last year.
I see. Okay, so I'm just gonna list some Sabres prospects. I'd be curious to get your general take on like who's number one, like what's like a ranking here of like all guys like under like let's say 24. You've got like Cousins. I guess Casey Middlestat is still around. Paterka. I guess I won't even get into the defense. Obviously, like it's exciting with Owen Power, but yeah, then you have like Jack Quinn, who came in last year and was really good. I remember people used to make fun of them for that pick, but I think now people really like him. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think now, Rossi or Jack Quinn? Who do you think is going to turn out to be the better player? Because that was the big debate at the time.
Oh man, it's got to be Quinn. I mean, he's already there. He's already doing it, and Rossi hasn't come into his own yet. I think it's tougher as a center. Rossi made a huge step this last year, but yeah, I think I have to eat a little crow on that one. It definitely seems like Quinn. And just to plug some of my stuff a little bit on with Fantasy Hockey Life, if you're a patron, you can see actually organizational ranks. So I can just tell you what the Buffalo ranks are. It is Owen Power, number one. No debate there. Jack Quinn at 2, Matt Savoy at 3. Then Noah Oshland and
wait,
Yuri
so this
Kulich.
is Cousins. Cousins isn't listed then, right? I assume
Cousins is not. Cousins graduated, so he's not. This is we do it under 100 games played. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, then, now that since you've gotten to Quinn and you've gotten to Oshland, like where would you rank Cousins in that list?
That is a really tough question. Cousins really broke out this last year. I mean, I'm thinking in a cap league because that contract he signed, like he basically is making similar to what Tage Thompson is making. And I think we can all agree that we'd rather have Tage Thompson and his amazing production. But the two are making like $42,000 apart or and change. And I don't think that Cousins is going to live up to that same potential, but he almost hit a 70-point pace. But unlike Thompson, who I think can kind of believe what he's doing now, a lot of Cousins metrics were out of line. They were a little high on his IPP and his shooting percentage. And I'm just not convinced that he's still on an upward trajectory. I think he might be someone who settles into that range, like 65, 70, 75, maybe. I don't think he's got Tage Thompson like point per game plus in him, is I guess what I'm saying, but I still really like him. So to answer your question, probably behind Quinn, I think, because I think Quinn still has a little bit more upside. So he's probably like third or so. But actually, I need to adjust this because I need to move Yuri Kulich way up. The guy had an insane. Oh, actually, this is organized wrong. Sorry. Devin Levi is second. Yeah, that makes sense. He's going to be an awesome goalie. I think he's going to be the starter in Buffalo, and he's incredible.
Do you think like next season, I guess, is it like already going to be like Levi and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as the two goalies for next year?
I think it's going to be Levi. So I was skeptical about that. And I talked to a lot of people, including a bunch of people who cover Buffalo. And they all said, yeah, like it's going to be Levi this year. And I'm still a little skeptical because that's a lot to ask for a really young guy to just step in and play, 50, 60 games. He probably won't play that many, but he'll probably be the man and be pretty valuable in redraft. Yeah. So if you could get him later, like, wow, that would be great. So anyways, those are, I don't know how far down the list you want me to go, but Power, Levi, Quinn, Kulich, and then probably Savoy and Oshland, Paterka, Luukkonen, something like that.
This is a scary team. Like they have a lot of good prospects.
Yeah. No, they're a very good team. And especially with the maturation of Dahlin and you got Power there. I mean, they're just, they're scary.
No one knew that. Tage Thompson. Actually, I was looking back. So again, like we were saying at the start, like there was the prospects draft and there's also the pro draft of the players who had played at least 82 games for the Skaters. And I was like looking through like the later rounds, and it was like we did 26 rounds. Like there was like real nobodies taken at the end there, except for one glaring exception, which is Tage Thompson. got taken in the 23rd round, 451st overall.
Oh my gosh.
That was a really good pick.
That was a really good pick. Shout out to Kevin and Mike for that one. That was incredible.
Yeah, I looked and like I couldn't find another pick of a player that I'd want. And like going up, like there was definitely no one after that I'd be interested in. And then like going earlier, and again, this is round 23. At round 20, I see Sam Bennett and Adam Larson, who still have like value in this league. And then like, but no one close to Tage Thompson. Like it's incredible that they got him so late. So that was great. I guess like he was really just, no one believed in him when he was a Blues prospect.
Just for context, other guys taken in that round: Matthias Janmark, Josh Levo, Tyler Mott, Cody Eakin, like Vinny Hinostroza. These are the types of players that were available, and they plucked Tage Thompson out of that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So how far do you want to go on this look back here? We can post the link to this spreadsheet for the patrons to listen to here. I'll post in the Discord. But maybe we can just read through all of round 2 just to finish that off, and then we can like discuss whoever we want here.
Yeah, I have a couple gems after that. So yeah, round 2 went Marino, Cousins, Natchez, Perfetti, Raymond. That was mine. Morgan Frost, Yaroslav Askarov went 27th. That's looking pretty good. Alex Holtz, Alex Newhook, Cole Caulfield, another one of mine. Cody Glass, Nick Robertson, Philip Zadina, Bowen Byram, Evan Bouchard, Connor McMichael, Vasily Podkolzin, Jake Ottinger went 38th, Capo Kakinen, and Spencer Knight. So just a couple I wanted to mention real quick. Jake Ottinger, I made a list so I can count how many down he went. But that was an incredible pick. You're talking the 8th goalie off the board, and he's like probably one of the best, certainly in terms of this cap setup where, you want someone really good, but also that doesn't cost a ton. And Jake Ottinger making $4 million is like amazing, right? So we just saw Sorokin, Shesterkin, they all getting paid. The ones that are good got paid a ton. Demko, a little bit more than that, but he was an incredible value, especially getting him so late. Definitely one of the ones that worked out the best, I would say. So good job, Alex Ben, on that one. And another one that I wanted to shout out was Bowen Byram, getting him 34th overall. Fred got him there. He is so good. I think people are skeptical, like how good can he be on a team that has Cale Makar? But Bowen Byram is so freaking good. Like even he doesn't have top power play, and even with some of the other defensemen in there, I mean, it's I don't think it's too outlandish to say he was a huge reason why they won the cup that year. Like he was obviously Makar and all the other guys, but if they didn't have another really strong puck mover and offensive defenseman like Byram, I'm not sure they would have had the depth, to be able to pull it off. So I really think Byram is amazing, and his salary this year is not too bad. It's gonna go up once he finally does get his big payday, but he's only making almost just under $4 million for the next couple, and he pushed his RFA deal a little bit longer, but that's really good value for someone who's gonna do as well as he does.
But I mean, like, I'm curious because you're talking about how valuable he was for Colorado when they won the cup and all that, but like he only had like 9 assists in 20 games. So as far as fantasy goes, he hasn't been especially valuable. Like I'm surprised that you're like talking about Bowen Byram when he went a pick before Evan Bouchard, who I feel like a lot of people are thinking next year, and why not with how he ended last season. For fantasy, he's going to explode. Maybe Byram is like, are you kind of saying, because I think right now you can still get, like, all that to say, like, I think you can get Byram for cheap now in Dynasty in a lot of leagues. So are you saying now's a great, do you think now's like a good buy time? You think like the offense is going to come at some point?
I've bought him. Well, actually, if you look at his underlines, the offense is there. The offensive generation, the expected goals is there. The play driving is there. It hasn't completely translated. Part of it, he's just been injured a lot. And so he doesn't have the games played, and the time on ice. But yeah, I think this is a good time to buy Bowen Byram, and even in a cap league, where you have a couple years of decent contract. But yeah, he's someone who I think really can pop off. I mean, you're right, Bouchard definitely. I mean, there were a lot of great picks in that round, but I think it's taken a while for Byram, and I still think that he's got a lot to show.
Cool. And then like looking at round 3 here, I'm seeing Moritz Seider was taken at 41st overall. That worked out really well. I guess last year was a bit of a down year, but like still really valuable, especially in the multi-cat league. I'll keep going. Yamamoto. Now we get to a lot of guys have not turned out too well. Yamamoto, Brandstrom, Turcotte, Kaliev, Sandin, maybe there's something. Valimaki, maybe there's something. Ty Smith, Drysdale, maybe there's something. Barrett Hayton, that was a really nice breakout this year. And then
Finally
Matt
coming around.
Boldy. Yeah, and then Matt Boldy right after him, and then Noah Dobson after him. So yeah, there were some really good picks here.
Those are good ones. And even Gabe Velarde going 56 to the Kings fan in our pool. And it didn't look so good for a while, but that's really come around. And he's, obviously in Winnipeg now. We'll see what happens, but he definitely showed that he's, really capable of scoring.
So what should we do here? I wanted to ask you one question, just a selfish question. Is there any pick I made in this draft that's a player that you would want? That was just something I thought would be a fun thing. So you could do one last making fun of me for how bad I did in this draft. So I'm gonna give you the list of who I ended up with.
Well, I have a list. Let me say it.
Okay.
And I'll pause when they're decent. So Cal Peterson, we talked about. John Marino, we talked about. Pavel Francouz, he played and I think you traded him for something. Alex,
I traded him to you. Actually, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on that trade. I traded him to you for Broberg, who still hasn't done anything, but he also was never given the opportunity. Do you think there's a chance that I'll end up being able to make fun of you about how you gave up Broberg for Francouz, or is he probably going to just end up being a nobody forever?
I think he's a depth defenseman. Not a nobody. Like, he's gonna play, he's gonna do stuff, but maybe you won that. But I got a goalie that I needed. I needed some games. Of course, Francouz was always friggin' injured. I ended up trading him, so I don't have him anymore. But yeah, that was a good trade for you. I think the one thing I'll say about a lot of these quote unquote bad picks is you moved on from them relatively quickly and got what you could for them when you had a chance. Then you had Alex Texier, who hasn't really done much. Joe Veleno, Elias Anderson, Pius Suter, who had a moment. He was all right, but
he was good for us in our first season when we won, so I couldn't complain too much again.
That's what you wanted. He's out of the league now, so whatever. Christian Vesalainen doesn't look like he's going to be an NHLer. Kevin Lankinen was probably your best pick, and I still think, and I've heard you say this on the podcast, and I would just want to tell you that I agree with you. Kevin Lankinen, I think, is a good goalie. I think he had a really bad stretch there where things kind of fell apart after Chicago. But if you look at his underlyings, and they actually I was talking with I forget who it was, one of the goalie experts, and we were saying how he completely rehabbed his game, and the underlying support that he's actually done really well this past year. So of course, Saros is not giving up the net, but I think he's a good, he could play 30-40 games and be decent. So that was a good pick. Then you picked a couple of Sharks. I don't have
him anymore. So
well, it was a good pick then. You picked a couple of Sharks, which is a huge mistake. Noah Gregor, Danil Gushin.
Hey, Gushin, I was hoping Gushin was going to be the guy you're going to say is my good one.
No.
He came in for a couple games last year and got like a goal and an assist.
There are people who believe. I don't. I've seen him play in person several times. And the thing is, he's just a peripheral perimeter player. And I don't think that he has, I don't think he has the potential to really kind of round it out.
Well, I'm hoping every single time, when, of course, if Gushin ends up like doing stuff next season or at some point, and I talk about him keeping Karlsson about like as a potential FA ad or whatever, I'm gonna every time mention how like the guy that Victor thinks is a nobody, Daniil Gushin, scored again.
Oh, great.
Okay, so not him. Oh no, the Flankin is my best pick of this draft. That really sucks.
Vakanainen didn't really end up doing much. Joel Kiviranta, he had a moment. He had a hat trick in the playoffs. That was cool. But he's not. I don't think
doesn't
he's
even count.
Zach Whitecloud, no. Brett Berard, no. Shane Bowers, no. Joey DeCord, sure. I think there's, like you said, there's some potential there. It didn't look good for a while, but he has come around, and he's going to be playing NHL games probably. So that one's not bad. Ryan Johnson seems like he's flamed out as a Buffalo prospect.
What? Victor, you're killing me. I thought he was going to be what he just signed. They just signed him. He hadn't even played a game yet. He just finished college. He's going to play next year. He's going to be huge. Everyone watch out for Ryan Johnson on the Sabres.
Okay, you can all believe Elan.
Where does he rank on your Sabres prospects ranking?
Oh, that's a good question.
He's not on the list. That's fine.
Where is he? He's not in the top 15. So
that's fine.
Oh no, there he is. He is there. He is like 12th.
You never know. I still have
saying
him.
There's a chance. Okay, and then Brendan Gooley didn't quite work out in LA. Rudolph Spalsters, hey, he was all right for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he's not in the NHL anymore, right? Didn't he leave? I
actually traded him to you. He's another guy I traded to you. I gave you Baltzers and someone for like a pick.
Yeah, and he did stuff for a little bit. Philip Chlapik, Brett Leeson, not interesting. Trent Frederick, do you still have him?
No, I dropped him. I think he might even still be in free. Or no, someone added him out of free agency. Once he like lost his minors eligibility, I dropped him because he wasn't doing anything.
Because he's kind of interesting. Depends on what he signs for. We just talked to Fluter Shinzawa this morning, and he was talking about how they definitely are going to sign him, which is part of the reason they're not going to be able to get a top line center, which is kind of hilarious. But he is a good depth player, and he might end up playing higher in the lineup than he should because of Boston's center issues. So Trent Frederick, a guy to maybe keep an eye on in terms of, cap leagues.
Right.
Then David Gustafson, no, Sam Montembeau. I was amazed with what he did this year, but yeah, I don't know that he has the staying power.
Oh, hey, let me ask you about this guy on Montreal who I added on a free agency at one point, Dobesh.
Oh, Jacob Dobesh. Yeah, no, he's good.
Nice. So you don't need to draft well. You just need to find these guys in free agency before Victor talks about them on their podcast.
It's true. We did talk about Dobesh, and they have Keaton Primo, who just hasn't really worked out. They just drafted probably their next starting goalie and Jacob Fowler, but he's like 5 years away, so you don't have to worry about him for a while. Dobesh, I think, is pretty close to being NHL ready. So yeah, you got a good one there for sure.
Nice. Okay. Well, glad to get something from you.
So basically, what I'm learning from this, Elan, is you should draft goalies because you're not terrible at that, except for Peterson.
Yeah, I guess okay. Yeah,
but we all thought he was going to be good, so can't blame.
And you know what? Like going into next season, I'm actually kind of happy about. Like I have cheap goalies. Like another guy I got out of free agency who worked out really well was Phoenix Copley. And again, this is a guy, This is a league where every goalie and even most of the like AHL starters are taken. But as soon as Peterson got waived, right? He got waived to be sent down, and they hadn't even announced who they were going to call up. But as soon as I saw that Peterson was waived last year, I saw that Copley was available in our league, and I just jumped on him because I assumed that probably will be him because I saw that he was the starter in the AHL, and he turned out to be great, a big part of our win last year. So I think
that's huge.
Yeah, I think that the real takeaway is you have to be like an obsessed nerd. If you want to like try to win now and trade away all your picks and still have okay prospects or have a chance to win once all your guys age out, is you have to just be always on top of free agency all the time, which I know a lot of people in the league don't even like me for because they feel like I'm doing too much streaming and too much like free agency stuff. And it's supposed to be more of like a long-term thing. Like I use my 30 moves every year without a doubt. And we get like 7 buyouts a year. I pretty much always use all my 7 buyouts because I could use some of my moves to grab guys on 1-year contracts, and I know I'll just buy them out, at some point later. So for what it's worth, it's not the true way to play Dynasty, but I'm a grinder.
Well, you use the rules, you maximize the opportunity and every advantage you have. That's certainly true.
Here, let me throw one more random guy at you. I know we're starting to run short on time here. I feel like I could just talk to you about this like forever. I'm so glad that if one person enjoys this podcast, I'll be happy because I'm having fun. I grabbed a guy at a free agency and he was doing actually pretty well until he got injured. His name is Cole Gutman on Chicago. And I was reading like some stuff on The Athletic. I don't know, saying that he might be like a guy who will make the team next year and potentially has like top 6 upside. Do you know this person? Have you heard of him?
I have heard of him. He's, I think, just a filler guy. I don't necessarily think he's anything special, but he's going to play games probably. So especially on that roster. So he's someone who's going to put up some stats, but yeah, not anyone that you should like, move to the top of your pool or anything like that.
All right. So I guess at this point, yeah. Anything else you want to bring up actually from this draft? Like any other like kind of late steals that jumped out at you that you wanted to give people kudos for? Obviously, I don't get any kudos for any of these picks. Maybe someone else could get some kudos for something.
There's some good ones, definitely. Like at 62, Brett picked Jason Robertson. That is looking amazing, especially considering Nick Robertson went 30 spots earlier, and we still haven't really seen much from him. So yeah,
is Maddie still here in the chat? I blame him. You should have said that we should take Jason Robertson. We took Pavel Francouz, and then right afterwards, Jason Robertson got taken. That's ridiculous.
You were thinking about it, yeah.
Well, I don't know if we were. Probably not. Probably hadn't even heard of him at the time.
He was a really good one, and obviously, what a superstar he's become.
He's been taken like routine in our mock drafts. He's taken the first round of every mock draft, so he's like a first round caliber fantasy guy that was taken the 4th round here. Wow.
Yeah. And Josh Norris right after at 71 with Kevin Mike. That's looking really good. I mean, basically top line center on a good team. Obviously, he had some injuries, but that's a really good one. And I expect big things from him next year. That Ottawa top 6 looking really good, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Brian and I will talk about. We were planning on talking about today, but like, so Brian and I will do our next episode next Sunday. We'll definitely dive into the Tarasenko signing and how that all shakes up. The thing with Ottawa is now, like, they have 9, I think, power play 1 caliber players, and there's only 5 spots. So I don't know if that means that just some players are going to lose out, or are they just going to go 50-50? In which case, maybe everyone loses out in terms of fantasy. Because, throw Shane Pinto in there, and you got 10. Like, you could have 2 pretty decent power plays. Like, don't forget, they have 3 defense. They have Chikrin, Sanderson, and Shabbat. Like, I feel like could all be PP1 quarterbacks on some team in the league. Where was Jake Sanderson taken in this draft, by the way? Or was he not, had he not been drafted yet at this point? Was he available? Oh yeah, he was taken at 81st overall. That was a very good pick by Shane and Adam. He's going to be really good, I think. Do you concur that Jake Sanderson is going to be really good?
I think he's going to be better IRL than in fantasy, but I still think he'll be good. Like, obviously the Chikrin signing didn't help him very much. I think he was in line for a power play 2 role and some decent periffs. But Jake Sanderson's a very good player. He's probably one of these guys that'll just, he'll play a lot of minutes and rack up some stats, but I don't know that he's going to be more than a 30-40 point guy until he can get some power play time, which I don't think he's going to get with those 2 ahead of him. But you're absolutely right with the stacked top 6. I mean, yeah, I mean, you could talk about exactly who it is. It's probably going to come down to the role and who fits what role on the power play. And remember, Norris was kind of the trigger man. And so is that going to still be the case now that they have Tarasenko, or is it going to be different? So I'm curious to see, but that team's definitely looking good. I remain skeptical and still will probably never fully believe in Eunice Corposalo, but it's interesting to see what'll happen with him.
He was so good last year. The Sens seemed to be good
Kings,
for like 1
year. The Kings defense
but he was good
really
on Columbus before he went to the Kings. How do you explain that one?
A little bit. He was up and down. There were times where he was terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think the Sens overpaid and gave too much term, but there's a chance, right? You never know with goalies. Maybe he's like, because also the thing with goalies is they could like learn. Like, it's such a game. I know nothing about hockey, right? Like, I just know fantasy hockey, but like my sense is it's like a game of inches, especially if you're a goalie, where like if you just get a little bit faster or a little bit like better reflex or whatever, you're gonna like, you could change your whole whatever. You talk to Kat Silverman every week, so what did you get a chance to ask her about Corposalo at some point?
Well, we usually don't talk about the pro goalies, but I have talked to other goalie people about him. And the thing is, he just needs the right system because he's so athletic and reflexive that he needs to not move around too much. He needs to know exactly where the shot is coming from. And when he gets a little too wild and too kind of moving around and moving side to side and relying too much on his reflexes, that's when he gets absolutely exposed. And that's what happened at times in Columbus. But when he was able to settle down and kind of have more structure, then he can look really good because he can make those recovery saves. It's all about the system though. And that's actually something that Kevin Woodley talks a lot about on his podcast, is that the teams don't, I think enough about that. They just kind of think, oh, this guy is good, I want him, instead of like, is this the type of system that we want? And the coach that's going to play a system that's good for this goalie.
Right.
I'm not sure that's going to be the case in Ottawa. So I think they might end up having some buyer's remorse. And I think Forsberg is actually a better fit for how they're going to play. So we'll see.
Anton Forsberg. He's but he kind of forgotten, after he like had such a bad injury last year. But 2 seasons ago, he was looking like he was going to be their starter for a while. He was looking really good. But I'm looking way down this list now. 157, Troy Terry. That was a pretty good pull.
Yeah.
Super late.
That was really good. There are a bunch of late goalies too. I took Dostal at 91. I think he's going to be the next starter in LA. Husso at 101. Jeremy Swayman. What did I say? LA? Yeah, Anaheim. Sorry. Jeremy Swayman at 102. That's pretty good. Joel Hofer went at 143. I know you have him now, but he was drafted really late.
You were saying that Hofer was number 8 on your list of goalies. And you said someone else was like number 11 who we were talking about before. Out of curiosity, where do you have Justice Annunen? Is he on the list?
Of course. Yeah. I'm actually going to talk to Kat about him this week, but I have him currently at 27. I think that his upside is maybe a little lower, but he's I think he's the only one there. So in Colorado. So if he has the opportunity, if he can harness that, it seems like he's had a kind of up or down development. But I'm eager to see what she has to say about him.
Yeah, I guess like Georgiev was kind of like nothing on the Rangers, and last year he was one of the top goalies in fantasy just because he was on Colorado. So definitely a lot of fantasy value for goalies is not just about how good the goalie is; it's just like what team you're on and if you're getting starts.
For
Man,
sure.
okay. So I guess, do you have anyone else? I think we probably need to wrap this up, but I want to keep going. So
The
hard.
only other one I wanted to mention, round 5, Dawson Mercer, who I know you guys ended up acquiring, but that was a really good pick by Brett. He's a good player, and I think that maybe he's not top of the lineup kind of guy, but that was a really good one. And there are a lot of pretty good late picks actually. So it's kind of interesting to look back and see where these guys would have gone. I know that a lot of us would do it differently
Oh,
if
of
we did it
course.
again.
So Dawson Mercer is like one of these guys who I worry about, just like the Devils, picked up Toffoli in the offseason. Like they keep adding good assets. And it's just like, I guess is Mercer, he has to be good enough to like crack a top 6 that already has Meyer, Hughes, Bratt, Heeshear, Toffoli. So I guess there's still room for one more, unless I'm missing someone. But they also still have Palat, who I guess is probably could just be a bottom 6 guy. But yeah, it's a very strong team, that's for sure. But do you think that Mercer, like, what kind of upside are you expecting from him?
Well, he's definitely one of these guys that's kind of too good, two-way for his own good, because he's really responsible. He's the kind of guy that you can throw on any line and instantly you have, kind of two-way presence, and you can unleash the potential of some other guys, which is why he might end up playing with someone like Meyer, who is really not good two ways. So he could be a good complement. And he's also, more of a passer playmaker, and he could really help set up someone like that. So it's really going to depend on the fit, but he's also really fast. So he can play with like your Bratts and your Hugheses, which I don't think Palat really can anymore. And Holtz, as good of a shot as he has, he's pretty slow. And luckily they have some decent centers now, because the other issue is Mercer can play center. So having him as your third line center is you're pretty happy about that. But we obviously want him to play right wing up in the top 6. And I think he could do either of those things. So it kind of depends on what they let him do. But I think he has 70, 80 point upside if he gets that right role that we all want. But we don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Yeah, he's definitely someone that I would look at like a last pick, of a draft for a 1-year league for next year, because I think he's going to be overlooked. He didn't have like amazing stats last year, but he did have a stretch where he was like on fire and was getting points every game. But it all kind of washed out to just 56 points overall, which no one's going to get excited about. But I think there's definitely potential, like you're saying, if he's like on the wing or playing with Timo Meyer, like that could be pretty good. But okay, Victor, obviously we can go on forever. We'll do another show at some point soon. If you want to talk more about this, just invite me on to Fantasy Hockey Life. I'll come on and talk just forever about this. And obviously you and I just need to talk offline at some point about what we're going to do about this team that I'm joining you. I'm like, this is really fun, people. Like Victor has a team in this league that he's in that apparently he's been in for a while. And he invited me to be his co-manager. And I'm going to finally like be like in the Lions Den here. Like I'm going to learn all the great prospect tips, because I'll be able to just go to him and be like, and it won't be just like self-serving. Like, hey Victor, what do you think of this guy? And he's like, oh, join the Patreon, like or whatever. Now it's just like, oh, we got to talk to strategists for the team. I am a patron, of course. I don't think I'm a high enough patron.
You
though.
are our first patron.
Ah.
You are our very first patron. And actually, I just want to put a plug in for, not ourselves, but I want to put a plug in for having a co-GM. I think it's super fun. And especially when you have different skills, like you're much better at like the streaming and looking at kind of short term who's playing in the lineup now. And sometimes I get caught gazing at the horizon a little bit and who's going to be good, too long from now. And so it's nice to have people that have complementary skills and just something that you can run a trade by. We talked about some trades at the beginning that maybe some people would have been like, what are you thinking? And sometimes when you don't have a co-GM to kind of put you in check or to run things by, it can be difficult, and obviously there are places like, our Discords and stuff where people can post things, but it's really nice to be able to have in-depth discussions with someone who's as invested as you are. So definitely a good time. I know some people have had horror stories about, like maybe getting in arguments and stuff, but I haven't really had that. I've had some disagreements here and there, but it's usually just because you look at things differently, and it's been really positive. So I've enjoyed it.
That's cool. Yeah, we barely gotten started, so hopefully you'll still have good reviews a year from now. But yeah, no, I've always enjoyed having co-GMs. Like Maddie and I are co-GMs in this league, and we've become good friends. Like honestly, for me, like especially now that I have a kid, like I feel like I don't have as much time to go out like with real life friends. So at least like, but I spent a lot of time last year just chatting with Maddie and also with John Reed, who I was a co-GM with in another league. And it's like I'm making friends this way, so I'm not like a complete loser. Like I'm playing fantasy, but at least I'm chatting with people while I do it. So yeah, I also will advocate for having a co-GM if you can do it. Victor, anything else you want to plug before I let you go here, aside from your two amazing podcasts?
Yeah, that'd be good. Obviously, yeah, I'm on Dollar Prospects Report with Peter Harling, Fantasy Hockey Life with Jesse. I also wanted to just mention that we have created a league that we call the Tier Dynasty. And if you like the Cupful, this is basically a dynasty version of the Cupful, inspired by the Cupful. It's a tiered version where you have basically your team and you can get promoted up to different, the top division. We had the first season last year where everyone was kind of in the same division. The top four went up to create what we called Lord Stanley's, top division. And so all the best of the best are competing against each other. It's not 100% a true dynasty because when you go up in a tier, you can't really take your players with you. So those guys will draft a new team, but we've kind of got it set up now that only like one or maybe two teams from each division will get promoted and relegated each year. So those teams will kind of be vacated, but then you're going to get most everyone else will just keep their team and you'll kind of try to, re-evaluate. And it's all based on promotion and consolation brackets. So you kind of work your way up and if you do poorly, you get relegated down to the bottom. So this is a patron of Fantasy Hockey Life perk, and it's a really fun league. There's tons of GMs, and actually this is brand new, Elon, but we actually just made a website with one of our friends, Brandon, who's a great patron. If you go to www.fantasyhockeylife.com/tidy, TIDY, you can read all about it. And if you think you're good at Dynasty Fantasy, come, take it to the next level and come join our tier Dynasty and see how you can do there.
Yeah, I mean, Victor and Jesse are like, if they're running it, it's going to be good. Okay, like I'm in this league with Victor, and aside from the fact that he should have vetoed the Marchand and Ovi for Quinn Hughes trade, like he's a good GM, and I would definitely recommend joining this league. Sounds like a lot of fun. And yeah, like he mentioned, also the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. You could play in two leagues, right? So join our league and join his league. We just passed our 400th registrant. So we'll see if we could beat last year. We had a really fun year last year. We had a lot of people, but we're ready to go. Like Kevin's been building all these cool automations so that we're going to be like on top. We're going to be like more on top of we could have 1,000 people in like, whatever, like 60 different leagues. And we'll be like on top of all of them, like, and making sure that everyone's having a good time and that like the chats are active and that everyone's active. Our big goal this year, Brian thinks it's like anyway, like my big goal is like no inactive teams. Like I just want to like we're gonna have bots that are gonna catch if like someone has like given up their team, because we usually end up filling up a wait list after the season starts of people who like, oh, I wanted to sign up, I forgot or whatever, and then it's like so we're gonna hopefully be able to just be like churning through that wait list as soon as someone, because people like, oh, and by the way, if you did sign up for the couple, I'm sure someone who's like 2 hours into this like Dynasty podcast isn't the type of person that is going to be like this. But if you did sign up and then like partway through you're like not happy with how it's going or whatever, I would encourage you to just keep playing and just try to have fun, but like don't bail without saying goodbye, right? It's nicer to just like be like, hey, I don't want to play anymore, can you replace me, versus just completely disappearing and then we have to have our bots that Kevin's is building to try to catch it in time, because we don't also want to just kick somebody out. Like we still have to message the person and be like, hey, we noticed you haven't been active. Sometimes people have just like, have personal lives. There's something going on. Anyway, I'm blabbing. But all that to say, it's the polite thing to do to let us know so that, why am I saying that? Join that league. Listen to Fantasy Hockey Life, join the Tidy, listen to a Dabber Prospects Report, and stay obviously subscribed to Keeping Karlsson if you like this episode. And if you liked our last episode where Brian and I were talking about the players, I made that spreadsheet of players who had like a very different first halves from second halves, and we talked through a bunch of them. We still have a lot more to get to. Next episode will be a lot focused on players who were a lot worse in the second half than the first half, and we'll try to dive into what happened there. So yeah, all you have to do is be subscribed. You'll get all the episodes. But Victor, it's been so awesome having you here. And I will talk to you, I guess, yeah, around a month and a half. We'll go over Calder candidates, and we've already been kind of talking about it. This is going to be that's going to be a really fun episode. Like, there's Bedard, but there's also like a lot of other really exciting guys. Arizona just signed Cooley. Luke Hughes is probably going to play his first year. Like, there's a lot of guys that it's going to be a very interesting Calder race next year, I think.
It's going to be one of the best, I think, definitely. And a lot of them are going to be fantasy relevant in keeper redrafts too, not just dynasty. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to chatting offline about our team and coming back and talking Calder candidates.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks everyone for listening. Until that episode next week, just everyone, please try your best to continue making it that fantasy hockey is for everyone. Bye. Fun show.
Yes, I hope 2 people like it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone who joined the chat. Mason said he liked it. So I appreciate that.
Hi, Mason. Twitterless Mason. Oh, different Mason. No,
Oh,
that's
and Jay
right,
Brew
Mason.
is saying he has Ryan Johnson. He'll be good. He's something. Like, they could have let him go to free agency, but they signed him for a reason, Victor. They obviously wanted him, didn't want to let him go.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. All right. See